Hi, my name is Frank. Welcome to The Boundless Mind. Today, I want to talk to you about the multiple levels of consciousness and how these levels awaken. Now, number one, what are levels of consciousness? Levels of consciousness are defined in different ways by different models. This is important to know. They are a thing, and we'll get to that, but we have multiple models that are used to understand experiences that happen within us, right? So in those models, you're going to have models that have 3 levels of consciousness, levels that have 5, 10, 7. It's all over the place, right? They will have different names. They will speak of different experiences. But in the end, they all kind of gravitate around the same experiences. Now, where there may be a difference is some are strictly psychological, whereas some include a spiritual life. And that's fine. Those are for different applications, and that's okay. Now, what's important to understand is that those models, they're not us. They're models, right? They're not there. We are not there to, you don't start off going, I'm going to go through these 9 levels of consciousness. You do, in the sense that certain techniques are given and with certain models, and you can follow those techniques. But the models are there to explain what we go through in our evolution. And so we could make a new model tomorrow morning, you and I, right? As long as we're aware of the different stages of life, then our model should be valid, and we can build techniques that work with it. Now, I'm going to refer to awakening and to awareness in this video. And they tend to be used a little bit interchangeably sometimes. And here's where I want to differentiate a little bit between the two. The awareness of something is the knowledge of its existence. And this, I believe, happens at 2 different levels, and we don't have a proper distinction between the two. I can be aware of the existence of, I can be aware on an intellectual level that we are one with the universe. Because I've heard a lot of gurus say it, I've heard, I've read it in books, it was all over the place. However, I haven't had the experience that we are one with the universe. And so I don't have a full awareness yet. The awakening is actually the moment when I gain that particular experience. And where things can get a little tricky is that I may reach an awakening and have an awareness of the new level I'm reaching, at which point, I'll go through my awakening and go, oh my God, yeah, this is what's happening. I read about this. I knew about that, right? And integrating it will be a lot easier. Whereas I've seen people get awakenings without having first developed the awareness of the existence of such a level. And so where I think the difference is, each of those levels, as they are reached, they require years to integrate fully. Now, the person who prior to it had gained awareness will sometimes be able to get a little quicker through it because they'll know what to expect, they'll know what's happening. Where the other person sometimes will resist that new level of consciousness because, well, they don't have an understanding of it, right? So this is where, for me, awakening and awareness are very different. Now, the levels of consciousness are not separate from each other, right? Sometimes you hear people talk about, oh, you're going to reach enlightenment, and they perceive it as though an enlightened person may not have to, make their breakfast in the morning because that's an ego experience. Well, no, the levels exist at the same time. The levels are more like the different levels of a house, right? So you discover the house, you walk into the house, first thing you see is the entrance. Then you discover a living room, then you discover a kitchen, a dining room. And as you discover each part on the ground floor, you start having an experience of the house, right? Now, at that point, you're sleeping in the living room. You might at first make your food in the entrance. You know what I mean? Like, you're discovering each part. As you discover the second floor, you now find that you have bedrooms. Oh, now you start sleeping in the bedrooms, but you're still going to go down to the ground floor to make your food in the kitchen because that's where food is made, right? So, enlightened people still have to feed themselves. Guess what? So, what are the basic awareness, which I think, as I describe them, you'll go, well, yeah, that seems obvious, Frank. First awareness, the awareness of our senses, right? So we start experiencing the world through our senses. Now, at first, as a baby, we don't even know that we're separate from other people. This is an experience that comes a little later. This is an ego experience. Now, right from the start, if you're a person that thinks like you need to kill the ego right now, no. There comes a point where you transcend the ego. As long as you're living regular life, that's not what you need to do, okay? So as a baby, we start developing that ego. We start separating from others, right? So we have our senses, we touch things. At that point, we're looking at mom, dad, and going like, ooh, look what we found. Then you start realizing that you have thoughts and emotions a little later. You start going, oh, wow, wait a minute. I think, And so that's a new experience that comes in. Now, I'm sort of skipping some a little bit. Like, you could break it down into a million, but I'm going with the main lines here. Now, a little later, and usually through meditation, through some sort of work, you start realizing that you also have an inner self. And that inner self is actually the same as your ego was able to perceive a little bit your thoughts and your emotions. It thought they were important, it thought they were you, but all of a sudden you have this inner self that goes, oh, my thoughts are not me. I can be separate from my thoughts. I have control over my thoughts. I can say, when I think this way, it hurts me. Let me try to reprogram this, right? And this is where a lot of people are. I mean, the vast majority of people are not at enlightenment, Vast majority of people are struggling with the ego, getting a little bit over the ego. This is where the bulk of humanity stands, right? Now, as you gain that awareness of the inner self and you start doing work on yourself, now this is where usually you'll start, looking at your shadows, looking at if you want to move forward spiritually or psychologically. Now you start also realizing that maybe we're more than that. Maybe we're, you notice you have an intuition. You sometimes get a sense of things. And that one's a little tougher to explain, right? You don't have, it's beyond your senses. It's like a new sense. So you start looking at that. You start hearing that, hey, possibly we're energy. Science is actually catching up on that one and starting to go, yeah, things are energy. Things are energy and movement. And so you start having that awareness, and that awareness itself is a very powerful one. Now, as you discover that you're energy, now you start wondering, well, if I am energy, and the air is energy, and the neighbor is energy, and everything is energy, well, things are sort of connected, aren't they, on that energetic level? And they are. Of course they are. Now, from here, things get a little trickier. And this is where, the already with the energy and whatnot, the linear approach was starting to fall apart a little bit. But now we're really entering a realm where linear thinking starts falling apart big time. Language is only able to give so much of the picture, but it can't give the entire experience. It's starting to be levels where our ego gets in the way. Now it's starting to be like, well, wait a minute. This is beyond the ego. It's beyond my experience of myself, because there's a connection to everything else. This is where we start noticing or feeling the existence of something beyond even our inner self. And we start thinking of our higher self. Some will call it still the soul. Some will call it's our connection to more than just us. And this is when we truly start realizing that not only are things connected, but as energy, things are one. We are all one thing. We are not separate from each other. And the ego resists this part big time, right? It's going like, how could I be? And again, each of those levels may take years from the moment it awakens, from the moment you actually get a feeling of it. And I'm not talking about awareness. Again, we can gain the awareness of this oneness as we explore. But the experience of the oneness is something that is very distinct and that is felt. Now, as that gets felt, the experience changes. You now start realizing, okay, wait a minute. I'm a part of Source, of God, of whatever you define it as, but you are part of that one thing, which is everything, right? Now, as you start gaining this awareness, there's another awareness that you're gaining, or that you may gain after. Again, like I say, the linear aspect here breaks. Language starts breaking apart, because those are experiences that are hard to describe, because they are not of the ego, and language is of the ego. So you start having an awareness of non-duality. And this is very important. Not only is it non-duality, but when we speak of oneness, oneness means that there's no separation, right? So now you have this duality, the duality of things are separate from me, but things are me. How do I deal with this? How, and the mind and the ego, and there's a struggle that happens at that point. And that's okay. That's part of the process, is that struggle. Now, the awareness of the duality of everything makes the world all of a sudden be a really unstable place for some reason. Because now everything you see, everything you had defined as being good or bad, as being, you know, like, no, or being me and you, it all starts falling apart. As this falls apart, you also start getting a sense that time itself is non-existent. Space, how can I be, you know, space implies that I'm separate from you. Space implies that I am a thing traveling in another thing, right? But I am not. I am space. And so many new experiences start happening. Now, further than that, you also discover what some call the great void. You also discover that not only are you one with everything, but there is nothing. And this is where the non-duality kicks in as well, right? Because everything is the same as nothing. I know I may be losing some people here, but follow me. Try as much as you can. Try to, if you need to, close your eyes. Try to experience what I'm talking about. Your brain is not equipped to fully understand it, to fully live what I'm talking about, but your being is equipped for it. And so this is the point where you start realizing that infinitely small and infinitely large are actually the same thing. Now, the awareness that is born of all this, there's only, the only way to describe the experience that happens at that point, and this is the closest that can be said in words to enlightenment. But it's the awareness of I am. And there's a reason this is what is used. There's a reason all that is said about it is I am. Because at that point, words have completely fallen apart. I am is as good as it gets. This has to be the full explanation. And so you reach a level that is I am. But you're not even done at this point. What follows is a complete unbuilding of everything, of the fabric of existence. But at the same time, it is not undoing itself, because it is, again, the fullness and the emptiness are one, right? It is said that God is a verb, right? And this is important because God is movement in non-movement. And so if you think of it visually, the visual I like to use in my own head is something that expands and contracts, expands and contracts. And so source experiencing itself is the possibility for any universe you could think of. And then it returns. And then it returns to nothing. And then it starts over and returns to nothing. Starts over, returns to nothing. And even that process does not explain it properly, because the truth is it cannot have a name. It cannot be described. Those are levels that, this is what you find. You get glimpse of this throughout the process. But this is as good as it gets. When you reach the veil, when you reach the great void, you only get small glimpse of the true nature of everything. Now, this is where enlightenment is happening. Like at that point, you're completely enlightened. You have awareness of your higher self. You're getting information that is beyond anything that your brain would have thought. And this is where two things can happen. Thing number one, you ascend. Now, when you ascend, you leave for a different level of existence. Now, as I say this, it's not really a different level of existence either, because just like the levels of a house, now maybe you're leaving for a different house in the city, right? But again, this oneness, I don't know how to put words to it, But this is where you can ascend and move on to another experience, or you can choose to remain in the wheel of life to help humanity reach its goal of enlightenment and ascension. And it is a choice. It is a conscious choice that you get to make at that point. Now, this is not a process that happens over one lifetime for most. What ends up happening is, for some, they will reach, the level where they become aware of their inner self, maybe, right? And that'll be their life, right? Now, during that life, we will get to that on another video, but we will build karma, we will live other karma that we have to go through, so on and so forth. When you reach the life where you're ready, because in your previous lives you've gone that far, where you are ready to go through to the higher levels, if you will, it will happen rapidly from a young age. And this is why you hear gurus often say, from the moment I was a very young child, this was happening. By the time I was 12, this is what I was doing. By the time I was 20, and because things happen really quickly, and the awakenings, they're multiple and they come all over the place. It's a little different, I suspect, anyways, from what I can hear other people talk about. Now, a lot of the models, I'm not going to touch on this in this video, but a lot of the models will also talk about other beings, other planes of existence. And we'll cover those in other videos, because those are also experiences we can have. Now, if you follow my videos, I will try to give you techniques for you to follow the path as quickly as possible. Now, the goal should not be to reach enlightenment this lifetime. The goal should be to get closer any way possible. And so you just work out your karma. You just try to cover the most you can in this lifetime. And who knows, you may get there. Maybe that's the life you're at. Maybe this was destined for you. But that should not be the goal when you start on this path. The goal should be, I want to do the techniques that I am told will awaken me. And the different models have different techniques, and they're all just as good. There comes a certain point in the last levels I was mentioning, the ones that cannot really be communicated through words easily. There's a point where the words don't matter, where whether you've done it through Buddhism, Hinduism, magic, whatever, the path you chose is not as relevant. There's a point where if you have had those experiences, you will speak to others who have had the same experience. You will recognize each other, and you will recognize the experience of it. And this is where words fall apart. But at the same time, words are what we have. So listen to the gurus, listen to the people trying to describe the process, and try to grasp as much as you can. Now, I can't give you everything in one video, so please, follow me. I will try to give you as much as I can. Comment, let me know your own experiences. Let me know what levels you've experienced. Let me know if you've experienced other things. Ask me questions. Let me know you exist. Like the video. Say, likes are free, guys, so please, just do. What do you think? How can I help you? How can you help me, right? Like, what can we do so that all of us can travel this path and move forward together? So please, leave comments, let me know you exist, subscribe. I will have plenty more videos, I will have more practical videos. In the meantime, I wish you a wonderful day. I hope I did not confuse you too much with all this. I love you. Namaste.